There are places in the world where disappearance feels louder than destruction. Places where nothing dramatic is seen, no final explosion recorded, no single moment to point at and say, this is where it ended. The Bermuda Triangle is one of those places. It does not announce itself with violence. It erases quietly. Stretching across a vast portion of the western North Atlantic Ocean, bounded loosely by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, the triangle is not marked by walls or warning signs. Ships cross it daily, aircraft pass above it without incident, and yet its reputation persists, not because of what is seen there, but because of what is not. For centuries, sailors have understood the ocean as a force that does not need intention to be lethal. Storms rise without malice, currents shift without warning. The sea does not hunt, it simply exists. And yet the Bermuda Triangle occupies a strange space in human imagination because it appears to do something more unsettling than destroy. It removes. The earliest whispers of unease surrounding the region predate modern navigation. Christopher Columbus himself noted strange compass readings during his 1492 voyage, writing of erratic behavior that unsettled his crew. At the time, such anomalies were absorbed into a worldview already filled with sea monsters and divine omens. The ocean was a place where the known world dissolved into uncertainty. But as technology advanced, mystery was expected to retreat. Compasses became reliable, maps sharpened, radios shrank the distances between vessels. And yet reports of disappearance did not vanish with superstition. They adapted. By the 20th century, the Bermuda Triangle had become a zone where modern confidence faltered. Aircraft with experienced crews vanished mid-flight. Ships sent routine messages and were never heard from again. No distress calls, no debris fields, no final explanations. The ocean, vast as it is, usually leaves evidence. Wreckage washes ashore, oil slicks rise to the surface, signals distort, but they do not vanish completely. The unease surrounding the Bermuda Triangle comes from the absence of these things, the silence. One of the most frequently cited incidents occurred in December 1945, when 5 U.S. Navy training aircraft, Flight 19, disappeared during a routine exercise. The weather was not catastrophic. The pilots were trained. Radio contact was maintained long enough for confusion to be heard in their voices. Compasses reportedly malfunctioned. Bearings no longer made sense. And then communication ceased. A rescue plane sent to find them also disappeared. What remains is not a single event, but a pattern that resists clean interpretation. Each disappearance alone might be explained. Together, they form a narrative that refuses to settle. The Bermuda Triangle does not behave like a trap. It does not claim everything that enters. In fact, most voyages pass through without incident. This selective nature deepens the discomfort. If danger were constant, it could be mapped and avoided. But inconsistency breeds doubt. What determines who disappears and who returns? Scientific explanations have been proposed, each offering partial comfort. Rogue waves capable of swallowing large vessels whole. Powerful currents like the Gulf Stream, capable of dispersing wreckage before it can be found. Sudden weather changes that overwhelm even experienced crews. Human error, amplified by stress and disorientation. All of these explanations are plausible. None are fully satisfying. Because plausibility does not erase the emotional weight of disappearance. When something is destroyed, there is closure in the damage. When something vanishes, imagination fills the gap. The Bermuda Triangle occupies that gap. What makes the region uniquely unsettling is not that it defies science, but that it exposes science's limits in the face of scale. The ocean is too large, too deep, too dynamic to be fully observed. Even today, with satellites tracking the surface and sensors probing the depths, vast portions remain unseen. Disappearance, in this context, is not extraordinary, it is expected, and yet humans struggle to accept it. We are a species that records, catalogs, and archives. We mark graves, we write names, we preserve evidence. The Bermuda Triangle denies us these rituals. It leaves no body to bury, no wreck to examine, no definitive moment to grieve. Instead, it leaves waiting. Families wait for news that never arrives. Investigators wait for clues that never surface. History waits for explanations that remain incomplete. This prolonged uncertainty is psychologically heavier than loss itself. The triangle does not kill loudly, it erases quietly.
and quiet erasure is harder to process. Over time, the region became layered with meaning. Writers and journalists amplified the mystery. The phrase Bermuda Triangle itself is relatively modern, popularized in the mid-20th century. Before that, these waters were simply part of the Atlantic, dangerous, unpredictable, but not uniquely named. Naming changes perception. Once labeled, the area became a container for anxiety, a place where modern civilization confronted the reality that even with all its technology, there were still zones beyond certainty. The triangle became less about geography and more about human vulnerability. And vulnerability is deeply uncomfortable in an age built on control. Pilots are trained to trust instruments. Sailors are trained to trust charts. When those systems appear to fail, whether due to mechanical error, environmental interference, or human misinterpretation, confidence fractures. The Bermuda Triangle symbolizes that fracture. It suggests a world where orientation itself can collapse. Standing on the deck of a ship crossing these waters, there is nothing visibly different. The sea looks the same. The sky behaves as expected. No boundary announces entry. And yet the knowledge of the triangle's reputation alters perception. Every fluctuation feels significant. Every delay feels ominous. The mind, primed by expectation, begins to search for meaning. This is where the Bermuda Triangle becomes less about physical danger and more about psychological terrain. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. When patterns break down, anxiety fills the void. Disappearance without explanation becomes a mirror reflecting our fear of the unknown. It is not that the triangle must be supernatural to be terrifying. It is terrifying precisely because it might not be. Because if ordinary forces, water, human error, can erase entire vessels without trace, then the boundary between safety and oblivion is thinner than we like to believe. The Bermuda Triangle reminds us that certainty at sea is always provisional, that navigation is an agreement with chaos, not a conquest over it. Perhaps the triangle does not take anything at all. Perhaps it simply reveals how easily things can be lost when the environment is vast enough and human presence small enough. The ocean does not remember ships. It does not remember names. It does not remember intentions. When something disappears into it, the water closes without record. The Bermuda Triangle is not a mouth. It is a silence. Silence is the true signature of the Bermuda Triangle. Not the silence of calm seas or empty skies, but the silence that follows unanswered questions. Radios that cut out mid-sentence. Coordinates that stop making sense. Journeys that never complete themselves. In most recorded disappearances, there is no moment of panic preserved. No final signal strong enough to anchor memory. Only interruption. This interruption unsettles us because it violates the way we expect stories to end. Even tragedies are supposed to resolve into clarity. A wreck is found. A cause is named. Responsibility is assigned. The Bermuda Triangle resists this structure. It refuses narrative closure. And when narrative fails, myth begins. Over decades, speculation rushed to fill the void left by missing explanations, magnetic anomalies, time distortions, underwater structures, alien intervention. These theories persist not because they are supported by evidence, but because they restore a sense of agency to the mystery. They give the disappearances an author. Humans are more comfortable fearing an enemy than accepting randomness. Yet when scientists examine the region, they find something more disturbing than the supernatural: density. The Bermuda Triangle lies beneath one of the busiest shipping and flight corridors in the world. More traffic means more incidents. More incidents means more opportunities for error. Add to this the volatile weather systems of the Atlantic, the sudden formation of storms, and the powerful currents capable of carrying debris far from its origin. From a statistical perspective, the triangle may not be exceptional at all, but statistics do not comfort those who vanish. What science explains in probability, the human mind experiences in absence. The difference between these perspectives is where unease takes root. Knowing that a disappearance is possible does nothing to resolve the personal devastation of never knowing how or why it happened. The ocean's depth compounds this uncertainty. Beneath the triangle lie trenches and plains deeper than most mountains are tall. Wreckage can sink beyond reach in minutes, settling into darkness where no recovery is feasible. In such an environment, disappearance is not dramatic. It is efficient, and efficiency is terrifying. In recorded cases, investigators often face a complete lack of physical evidence. No black boxes, no whole fragments, no bodies. Even advanced sonar and deep-sea exploration offer limited reach. The sea absorbs impact, scatters remains, and erases trajectories. The Bermuda Triangle does not need to hide anything. The ocean does that naturally. Yet despite this, the mystery persists, not because answers do not exist, but because they are incomplete. Each explanation solves part of the puzzle, while leaving the emotional core untouched. Why here? Why them? Why nothing left behind? These questions echo far beyond the triangle itself. They touch on a deeper human fear, the fear of being forgotten, of disappearing without record, of leaving no mark to prove we were ever here. At sea, this fear becomes immediate. Sailors have long understood that the ocean is indifferent, but the Bermuda Triangle sharpens that understanding into something personal. It suggests that even preparation and experience offer no guarantee of recognition. You can follow every rule and still vanish. This realization undermines a central promise of modernity, that safety can be engineered, that risk can be minimized into insignificance. The triangle stands as evidence that risk can never be reduced to zero. Navigation systems are built on trust. Trust in instruments, trust in data, trust in interpretation. When those systems fail, whether due to malfunction or misreading, the result is not chaos, but confusion. And confusion at sea is lethal. Many recorded incidents describe crews become disoriented, doubting their instruments, turning in circles while believing they were correcting course. In these moments, technology does not fail dramatically, it fails subtly, and subtle failure is harder to recognize. The Bermuda Triangle amplifies these moments of doubt. It does not require storms. It does not require violence. It requires only a small fracture in certainty, widened by stress and scale. Once orientation is lost, recovery becomes increasingly difficult. The ocean offers no fixed reference points. Every direction looks the same. Disappearance then becomes not an event, but a process. This process is what haunts investigators. There is no single error to isolate, no mechanical fault to condemn, only a gradual unraveling of awareness, a slow drift away from recoverable space. And once that threshold is crossed, recovery becomes unlikely. The triangle's reputation feeds on this ambiguity. Each new story reinforces the expectation of danger, which in turn heightens anxiety for those who pass through. Anxiety alters perception. Perception alters decision-making, and decision-making under stress can produce exactly the outcomes people fear. In this way, the Bermuda Triangle becomes partially self-sustaining, not because it is cursed, but because belief shapes behavior. Still, belief alone cannot account for everything. There remain cases with details that resist easy categorization, timelines that do not align, weather reports that contradict disappearance conditions, communications that degrade without clear cause. These anomalies keep the mystery alive. They serve as reminders that the ocean remains fundamentally unknowable, that no amount of data can fully tame an environment so vast, dynamic, and deep. The Bermuda Triangle is...
The danger of the Bermuda Triangle is not confined to the moment of disappearance. Its deeper power lies in what follows, in the long aftermath, in the unresolved space where explanation should be, but is not. This is where the triangle truly begins its work, not in the ocean, but in the human mind. When something vanishes without trace, the loss does not settle, it hovers. Families cannot grieve properly because grief requires certainty. Investigators cannot conclude because conclusions require evidence. History cannot close the chapter because nothing definitive has been written. The missing remains suspended between existence and absence. This psychological limbo is more corrosive than tragedy. In disasters with clear causes, the pain is sharp but finite. There is a sequence to follow: shock, mourning, remembrance. But in disappearances, especially those associated with the Bermuda Triangle, the sequence collapses. Hope lingers long after it should have died. Doubt replaces acceptance. Every rumor feels like a possible answer. The triangle feeds this state of suspended resolution. In many cases, official investigations end quietly. Files are closed not because the mystery has been solved, but because there is nothing left to examine. This bureaucratic closure contrasts violently with emotional reality. Paperwork may conclude, but uncertainty does not. This disconnect between administrative finality and human longing deepens the myth. The Bermuda Triangle has become a symbol not of death, but of unfinished stories, of journeys interrupted mid-sentence, of lives paused rather than ended. This distinction matters because humans are wired to seek endings. Without them, imagination becomes relentless. Over time, the mind constructs explanations to protect itself from the anxiety of not knowing. Supernatural theories thrive here not because people reject science, but because mystery without agency is unbearable. It is easier to believe in hidden forces than to accept that meaning might simply dissolve under certain conditions. The triangle becomes a narrative container for that discomfort. What makes this region psychologically unique is not the volume of disappearances, but the quality of their uncertainty. Many vanished vessels were not in distress. They were not transmitting panic. They were not reporting catastrophic failure. They were moving through ordinary conditions until they were not. That sudden shift from normalcy to absence disrupts our sense of continuity. It suggests that stability is more fragile than we assume, that the line between routine and oblivion is not always marked by warning signs. In this way, the Bermuda Triangle becomes a metaphor for human vulnerability in an indifferent world. We prefer to believe that catastrophe announces itself, that danger escalates gradually, giving us time to react. But many triangle cases challenge this belief. They imply that disappearance can be swift, quiet, and complete. This realization seeps into collective consciousness. Pilots flying over the region may know intellectually that it is safe, yet awareness of its reputation alters perception. Small anomalies feel magnified. Instrument fluctuations provoke unease. Rational assessment competes with subconscious expectation. Fear does not need evidence to operate. It only needs context. The triangle provides that context. Over decades, this psychological weight has reshaped how stories about the region are told. Early reports focused on navigational confusion and weather patterns. Later accounts emphasized mystery, distortion, and inexplicable behavior. Language shifted from technical to symbolic. Words like vanished, lost, and never found became central. These words carry emotional gravity. They imply absence without closure. They suggest a removal rather than a destruction. This linguistic framing reinforces the triangle's identity as a place where things do not merely end, they are erased. Erasure is more unsettling than death because it threatens memory itself. When no remains are recovered, there is nothing tangible to preserve, no artifact to display, no site to mark. The lost become abstract. Over time, their stories risk dissolving into rumor.
The Bermuda Triangle thus becomes not only a physical zone, but a cultural filter. It determines which disappearances are remembered and how they are interpreted. Similar incidents elsewhere are categorized as accidents. In the Triangle, they are transformed into enigmas. This selective mythologizing reveals more about us than about the ocean. It exposes our discomfort with randomness, our need for meaning, our refusal to accept that some losses leave no lesson behind. In many Triangle cases, investigators eventually identify plausible causes: sudden storms, navigational error, structural failure, but plausibility does not equate to certainty. Without evidence, conclusions remain provisional, and provisional truths do not satisfy emotional demand. The mind lingers on unanswered questions. What if the compass really failed? What if the radio signal didn't fade naturally? What if something subtle went wrong, something not yet understood? These what-ifs accumulate, forming a psychological undertow. The Triangle becomes a space where doubt is not resolved, only postponed. This is why, despite advances in technology, the myth has not faded. Satellites can track ships, GPS can pinpoint location, data streams can monitor conditions in real time, and yet when something disappears, the explanation is still often incomplete. Technology reduces risk, but it does not eliminate uncertainty. The ocean remains too large, too dynamic, too indifferent. The Bermuda Triangle reminds us that even in an era of constant surveillance, some places resist total observation, that blind spots still exist, and where blind spots exist, imagination thrives. The fear associated with the Triangle is not fear of attack or disaster. It is fear of dissolution, of slipping out of the record, of becoming a question mark rather than a memory. The fear of insignificance. To vanish without trace is to be denied narrative. To be lost without explanation is to challenge the idea that lives have coherent arcs. The Triangle threatens that belief. And so it becomes more than a maritime curiosity. It becomes a philosophical problem. What does it mean to exist in a world where disappearance can occur without acknowledgement, where the environment does not respond to loss, where the universe offers no commentary on human suffering? The Bermuda Triangle does not answer these questions, it simply races them, and in doing so, it transforms geography into reflection. There's a particular kind of fear that does not arrive with noise or urgency. It does not trigger instinctive panic or immediate resistance. Instead, it settles slowly, like a realization that comes too late to be undone. The Bermuda Triangle embodies this kind of fear. Not the fear of impact, but the fear of erasure. In many accounts associated with the region, the last known moments are ordinary. Course corrections, weather checks, routine communications, nothing suggests that catastrophe is imminent. And then continuity breaks. The narrative does not escalate, it ends. This absence of escalation is what makes the Triangle psychologically corrosive. Humans expect warning signs. We look for patterns that signal danger. When those patterns fail to appear, we are unprepared not only for loss, but for the lack of meaning that follows. Disappearance in the Triangle often appears arbitrary, and arbitrariness is deeply unsettling. In structured systems, loss can be rationalized. In accidents, blame can be assigned. In natural disasters, cause and effect are visible. But when a ship or aircraft vanishes without trace, the usual framework is collapse. There is no clear villain, no identifiable failure, no moment to anchor responsibility. The mind resists this collapse. To cope, we search for hidden order. We revisit data, we replay recordings, we examine weather charts, mechanical logs, crew histories. Each detail is scrutinized for significance. Often none is found. And yet the search continues. The Bermuda Triangle becomes a space where investigation itself turns inward, where the act of seeking explanation reveals our discomfort with uncertainty more than it reveals external truth. The mystery persists because it touches something fundamental, our need to believe that the world is legible. That legibility fails at sea. The ocean does not provide feedback, it does not confirm hypotheses, it does not preserve evidence for later analysis. Once something sinks beyond a certain depth, it exits the human sphere of interaction. This exit is final. What remains is speculation, not as entertainment, but as psychological survival. Speculation allows us to maintain the illusion that disappearance is not random, that it follows rules we simply have not yet discovered. The Bermuda Triangle has become a repository for this illusion. Over time, it has absorbed layers of interpretation, each reflecting the era that produced it. Early sailors attributed anomalies to divine will or monstrous forces. Mid-century writers framed the Triangle as a technological anomaly, a space where modern instruments failed. Later interpretations leaned into extraterrestrial or interdimensional narratives, mirroring broader cultural anxieties about unseen powers. Each explanation says more about the storyteller than the sea, the fear of being unaccounted for. In modern societies, existence is defined by documentation: birth certificates, passports, medical records, digital footprints. To vanish without trace is to fall outside these systems. It is to become undocumented in the most literal sense. The Bermuda Triangle threatens this structure. It suggests that despite layers of bureaucracy and surveillance, the world still contains zones where identity can be stripped away, where names become statistics, where lives dissolve into unresolved files. This is not merely unsettling, it is destabilizing, because if disappearance can happen without explanation, then meaning itself becomes conditional. It depends not on what we do, but on whether the environment allows our actions to be recorded. The Triangle highlights this dependence. It exposes the uncomfortable truth that much of what we consider permanence is contingent. Memory relies on preservation. History relies on evidence. Without material traces, narratives falter. The ocean, in this sense, is not hostile. It is simply incompatible with human systems of remembrance. This incompatibility is what transforms the Bermuda Triangle into a philosophical space. It forces confrontation with the limits of human-centered thinking, the realization that the world does not prioritize our stories. When something disappears into the Triangle, it is not singled out. It is absorbed. The ocean does not distinguish between the extraordinary and the mundane. It treats all objects equally, as matter subject to its forces. This indifference is more frightening than malice. A malicious force can be resisted, an indifferent one cannot. The Bermuda Triangle thus becomes a symbol of existential vulnerability, not because it is uniquely dangerous, but because it strips away the comforting illusion that danger is always intentional or avoidable. In this context, the Triangle's reputation persists not as a warning, but as a reminder that disappearance is an inherent possibility in a world of scale, that even with planning, training, and technology, outcomes remain uncertain, that the universe does not owe us explanations. As Chapter 2 closes, the Triangle no longer appears as a mystery to be solved, but as a mirror, reflecting our fear of silence, our discomfort with unresolved absence, our need to believe that loss must have meaning. The Bermuda Triangle offers no such assurance. It simply exists, vast, indifferent, and capable of swallowing narratives as easily as vessels.
At a certain depth, the ocean stops behaving like a place and begins to feel like a condition. Light weakens. Direction loses relevance. Distance becomes abstract. The Bermuda Triangle exists most powerfully at this depth, not as coordinates on a map, but as an idea about what happens when human meaning reaches its limit. By the time a vessel disappears here, the event itself is already over. What continues is interpretation, memory, fear, the slow realization that disappearance is not a disruption of the natural order, but part of it. The triangle does not break the rules of the world, it exposes them. In human culture, existence is defined by recognition. To exist is to be seen, recorded, remembered. We measure lives in dates, names, achievements. We anchor meaning in continuity. But the ocean does not operate within this framework. It does not preserve continuity. It does not acknowledge identity. When something vanishes into the Bermuda Triangle, it does not transition into another state of being. It simply leaves the human frame of reference. This is what unsettles us most. Not that people die there, death is familiar, but that their disappearance resists interpretation. There is no narrative bridge between presence and absence, no symbolic transformation, no final image to contain the loss. The triangle becomes a space where meaning itself fails to cross. Philosophically, this forces a confrontation with a truth we rarely face directly, that significance is not intrinsic, it is granted, maintained, and easily withdrawn by environments that do not accommodate memory. The Bermuda Triangle reminds us that meaning is not guaranteed by existence alone. It depends on context, on scale, on whether something remains visible long enough to be acknowledged. At sea, visibility is temporary. Human history is filled with disappearances that have been absorbed into myth or erased entirely. Lost expeditions, unmarked graves, civilizations that leave behind only fragments. The triangle condenses this historical pattern into a single symbolic region. It is not unique, it is representative. The difference is that in the modern era, we are unaccustomed to such erasure. We live in a time of constant documentation. Surveillance is normalized. Absence feels abnormal. When something escapes record, it feels like a violation. The Bermuda Triangle violates this expectation. It suggests that despite technological saturation, there remain environments that exceed our capacity to account for everything. That even now, there are places where disappearance does not trigger immediate explanation. This realization destabilizes our sense of control. Control is a comforting illusion. It allows us to believe that the world responds to effort, that preparation guarantees outcome, that safety can be engineered. The triangle undermines this belief not through chaos, but through quiet indifference. Nothing announces itself. Nothing resists. Things simply stop appearing. In existential terms, the Bermuda Triangle confronts us with the possibility that existence does not imply permanence, and permanence does not imply meaning. That something can matter deeply to us and still vanish without consequence to the world at large. This is not cruelty. It is scale. The ocean operates on scales that dwarf human concern. Time stretches, depth multiplies, energy redistributes without regard for narrative. Within this system, disappearance is not exceptional, it is efficient. We resist this efficiency because it threatens our self-concept. Humans define themselves as agents, actors within stories. We assume that our actions ripple outward, that presence leaves residue. The triangle suggests otherwise. It implies that under certain conditions, agency dissolves. Actions conclude without echo. This is why supernatural explanations persist. They restore agency by attributing disappearance to intention, a force, a mechanism, something that chooses. But the most unsettling possibility is that nothing chooses, that disappearance is simply what happens when fragile systems encounter overwhelming environments. In this reading, the Bermuda Triangle is not a predator. It is a threshold, a point beyond which human frameworks, language, memory, explanation no longer function reliably. Crossing this threshold does not guarantee loss, but loss beyond it becomes difficult to recover. And recovery is what humans depend on to make sense of the world. Without recovery, there is only acceptance, or denial. The triangle does not offer lessons, no warnings that can be universally applied, no formula to prevent future disappearances entirely.
It does not teach, it reminds. It reminds us that existence is conditional, that presence is temporary, that recognition is not assured. And perhaps most disturbingly, it reminds us that the world does not require our stories to continue. Ships sail through the Bermuda Triangle every day. Planes cross above it without incident. Life proceeds. The ocean remains. The triangle does not need to claim everything to maintain its power. It only needs to exist as proof that disappearance is possible without explanation. In the end, the Bermuda Triangle is not about what is lost there. It is about what we lose when we confront it. The illusion that every question has an answer. The belief that every life leaves a trace. The comfort of knowing that meaning is permanent. The triangle does not deny these things aggressively. It simply withholds confirmation. And in that withholding, it becomes one of the darkest places on Earth, not because of danger, but because of what it reveals. That sometimes, the world remains silent. And sometimes, silence is the only answer.